Welcome back, Vintage RC fans. Taking a little break from the street weapon video. We will get back to the track and race the car with the improvements that I've outlined. Stay tuned for a part 2 video. I think we're going to be able to really compete next time at the track with street weapon. In the meantime, I've acquired a JrxT. As I mentioned in my first video, I am always on the lookout for vintage RC cars that I can clean up a bit and flip and sell on to somebody else to appreciate. I already have a really nice JrxT, but I came across this one and it needs just a few things to really clean it up and make it worth a ton more than how I got it. So I'm going to walk you through a quick just kind of refurbishing of JrxT that should have some pretty good value when we're done. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so here's our JrxT that I picked up relatively cheap, but I think we can get it cleaned up and sell it on for even more. This kit came with, as I bought it, came with all these electronics installed. This 410M1C, I had one of these myself. One of the early high-frequency speed controls with current limiter. It was nice, and this speed control itself is really nice. I think the wires are all pretty good length. Switches and everything intact. This itself could sell on pretty well. The motor, BNR, looks like a stock motor. I never ran these motors. It's got bushings. It's a Race Prep brand motor. Fixed end bell, definitely a stock motor. It's also pretty clean. Maybe able to sell that on to somebody looking for one. The servo it had in it, Futaba S148. These came with all the junior radios, Magnum Juniors. That's what you find in most of these cars. People who hadn't upgraded the servo yet. What's good to know about it? It was servo taped into the car, as I mentioned. See the remnants of the servo tape there, but no holes drilled in the chassis. That's awesome. Most people were drilling holes in the chassis to lock that servo down, but it really degrades the value of the car these days. So really nice to see. That servo tape will clean up off of there pretty easy. Same with the tape from the receiver. The chassis should clean up really well. Overall, it's pretty good. There's a couple things that need to be replaced about it. This mount for the 5-link here, the ear is broken off. It should have 2 ears like that one. I've got plenty of those laying around. That'll be easy to swap out. The body mount back here, he mounted the on-off switch with a zip tie and drilling 2 holes in the rear body mount. I believe I have another one of those body mounts to replace that doesn't have that, make it that much nicer. The rear shock tower's got some extra holes. See them there. Only the main large 4 holes should be there. Those side holes, these ones here, these shouldn't exist. Those are there because the speed control he had mounted to a shelf, and the shelf attached to the rear shock tower. So the fix for that is replacement of the rear shock tower. Also believe I have one of those. And just general cleaning, really. The shocks were leaking, all the shock fluids all over the control arms in the front. The rear shocks are leaking pretty good. Most people, I think, don't even put shock oil in shelf queens. So we can just clean the shock oil out of these shocks, reinstall them, and then there won't be any issue. I'm sure the seals are bad, but why put new seals in a car you're putting on the shelf? Chassis-wise, this is a really clean one, really. I mean, it's got some surface scratching that you see in the center. It's got your typical rear scuffing that happened to boy, like first or second run, you'd always get these scrapes in the back. Car would bottom out in the back corner there. Every car that's been run at all, you generally see that. In the front, though, it's really good. The kick-up angle there is perfect. Even the front kick-up body plate, those 3 ribs usually take a beating, and there's marks all over them, but that one's pretty good. So that one will look nice. So yeah, just general cleaning on it, and we'll get it ready. A lot of this just crud and dust will clean up really nice. It's really a diamond in the rough, and get it cleaned up. I'll walk you through the process and get you some video of the final product. Stay tuned. Okay, so started the teardown on the chassis. I have the whole front end removed as an assembly, and I'm just going to take this whole front end as it is and basically dunk it in simple green. I'll get a bucket going and wash all these parts off in a simple green water mixture with a toothbrush and scrub them down. And so I'll break it down into sub-assemblies like this, because all of that can stay together. No real point in tearing it down further than that just for cleaning. I'll get the rest of the components off the chassis, the steering pivots here, the antenna mount and battery tray. I pulled the dirt shields off. They were just servo taped to the chassis. These dirt shields, actually, when I look at them, they don't seem like the just cheap Lexan ones that came with the kit. They seem like they're a molded black plastic aftermarket shield, because they're black from both sides. They're not, it's hard to tell. It could be Lexan, but I don't know. It seems like an aftermarket part, which is kind of neat. I didn't know those existed. I have the whole rear end to tear down still. I'll probably break it down into a sub-assembly like the front. The transmission, of course, I'll take off, and there's something weird going on with the spur gear. It's quite loose. It works back and forth easy. I don't remember them being so loose, so I may try and adjust that while the trans is off. And then, of course, just thorough cleaning. So that's where we're at right now. Stay tuned. Okay, just a side note. When tearing these cars down, here's an issue you'll run into. These screws, all of the black, large screws, the 8/32 screws, I believe they are aluminum screws that are black anodized. These ones here that hold the trans are just steel, and those hold up pretty well and don't really show any wear, really, unless they're scratched up. But these black ones, they'll look like this one in a heartbeat. With one misstep of the screwdriver, you'll twist it in there, it'll look like that. They scratch on the surface real easy. You gotta try and avoid that. These screws are getting hard to come by. You can find packages on eBay sometimes, but I try and buy them up when I do for this reason. I'll be replacing that bad screw. That's just how it was. But the rest of them, I'll be so careful to use the proper size Phillips screwdriver and hold it in there tight while screwing in or screwing out. Never using a power drill or anything, because it's just so easy to round them out or just make any marks at all on them, then they don't look right. So just a side note on doing that. Alright, so when your desk starts looking like a war zone, that's when you know you're getting close. Everything's all torn down here. I've got basically complete 5-link assemblies. I tore it down to that. I will be pulling the axles and bearings out because I'm going to be throwing everything into basically a bucket of simple green and water solution. So I don't want the bearings getting soaked in water. I'll clean those out individually. I've got the trans assembly off. Like I said, I'm going to go through that. The spur gear is kind of loose and wiggles around on there. I don't think that's right, That could have been built funny. I'll be taking the rear body mount off and swapping that out. Rear bulkhead, leave that pretty complete. Oh, well, swapping out the shock tower because those holes shouldn't be there. Yeah, rear shocks off the car. These rear mounts, the lower shock mounts, are some of the Losi gold out there. You cannot find these new, or there's rarely used. They break easy. I think there was a guy 3D printing them. I think it's the Sabula guy, so that's cool. There's that option out there for building a runner. But factory ones are really rare, so got to be real careful with those. Yeah, I think we're basically ready to clean, so we'll walk you through that process. Okay, so like I said, we're going to take all these sub-assemblies that we have all separated out. As you can see, they're still real dirty everywhere and oily from the shock oil that leaked out. Just throw them in a bin of hot, soapy, Simple Green and water solution and scrub all these parts. Get all the angles, get all of that loose dirt off of everything. Works really good. The Simple Green actually leaves a bit of a residue behind, which is perfect. It keeps everything, all the blacks looking real black, and it doesn't dry out. It leaves kind of a shine on everything. That's why I use Simple Green. So just take all these sub-assemblies, all these separate parts. We're going to throw them all individually in the bin and get them cleaned up and start reassembling. Alright, once the sub-assemblies are clean, we move on to the chassis itself. I spent some time removing all of the servo tape. There was a lot of it. There was all the way down the edges for the dirt shields. There was leftover tape where the servo was and where the receiver was. Got all of that cleaned up, mostly just scraping with my thumbnail. You don't want to use any kind of razor blades or anything. You could risk scratching the chassis further. Cleaned up the bottom, just kind of wiped everything down at the end with Simple Green also. Still these cracks, or these scratches, sorry. Probably mostly, the way they're shaped, it's probably from the person setting the car down on a paint can, or just wherever this car sat for so many years. When you run a car, you're not going to get scratches that go like that. So this just all came from the car sitting. Those scratches are definitely from running, but so the car chassis cleaned up pretty well. It's still really presentable. Again, no servo holes, which is so cool. And it's cleaned up and ready for reassembly. Okay, I've got the shocks all rebuilt. I took them all apart. I drained the oil that was in them. Cleaned out the shock bodies and cartridge and everything with motor spray. And then I put in, just on the shock shaft and a little bit around the cartridge and the base of the cartridge, I put some really thick silicone oil. I used this Mugen 50,000 weight. Just enough to give the shocks a little resistance so they're not total friction shock feeling. They have a little bit of dampening quality to them, which is good. But they won't leak all over everything. This 50,000, well, I guess eventually it might work its way out past the O-ring, but it's going to take a really long time. So that's what I did for the shocks there. I did go through the transmission too. It had all the bearings in it and everything. Yeah, I added a few shims. I got it spinning a lot freer, but I got it locked down. The spur you can barely move. I shimmed it. I guess I don't even know why I really went to that length for a car that may just sit on the shelf, but just didn't feel right to me. So that's that. Still working on rebuilding the rest of these components. They all turned out great. They're all dry now. Maybe look at these components in your hand. I mean, it's like the day they were assembled, the day they were bought. Everything's so clean. Everything turned out good. Gonna replace, there's that shock tower with all the extra holes in it. Gonna get rid of that. There's the broken 5-link mount. Gonna get rid of that. I think I'm finally ready for reassembly, I believe. Yeah, alright, let's go back together. Okay, so if you've watched some of my other videos, you'll see that on my main car shelf, toward the bottom, I have all these bins. These are the support parts. I've got the bins organized into different eras of mostly Losi cars. There's an associated bin too. But someday we'll make a video on just digging through these bins because there's tons of cool parts in there. But so I went through the Losi bins. I have 2 bins of Losi parts. One of them's out already. Trying to find some of these parts we need to rebuild the JrxT. So, of the parts that I needed to replace, first off, I realized a mistake. This is the tower we took off the JrxT. It's got those 2 sets of holes underneath the big hole that I didn't think either of those belonged there, but it turns out, brand new in the package, it does have those outer holes in the corners right there. It has those. So that person who owned this truck only drilled 1 extra set of holes. Still, it's not right, but I thought they both weren't supposed to be there. But so I have one new in the bag. $5 back in the day. But I also had one just used, which is pretty clean. It's got a couple scratches on it. That'd be on the back side. Front side, pretty good. One little scratch here. I'll probably use this in the build. This one will go into my spares for some runner or something. The mounts I have new in the package. I have some also on some extra links I have laying around. I'll probably leave those in the package and rob one off of some spare links. So that settles that. I'll use this, put that in my pile. Okay, that's going back into stock. So are these. So that'll fix this broken eared one. This will go into the bin for a runner, because again, the JrxT, or the 2 really also, doesn't even need that top mount. That top mount was an extra hole you could drill in the top of the buggy, and you could put a body clip around it. The truck, it doesn't even touch anything, so it doesn't need to be there at all. So that'll be fine for our build. I have a bag of new screws. As I mentioned, every time I see these on eBay, I buy them up. Part number 6208. There's short and long. I think these are the short ones. These are 8/32 by 3/8. I think they have a little longer ones too. But either way, when I see the black Losi screws, buy them up. Because again, one bad twist of the screwdriver and you wreck them. So, well, we only need 1 or 2 for our build, so I'll use some of those. Finally, the T, the actual body mount. Shoot, where'd it go? There it is. The body mount we had the holes drilled in the top corner. I do have a new body mount in the bag, but I shouldn't even need that. I found this one, which was the same, down to about the 3rd hole. When they come new, they're 5 holes. So most people ended up cutting off at least those bottom 2 holes. So I had one with no drill holes in it. It'll be nice. That'll be going in our pile for our build. Let's put them on. Alright guys, check it out. The JrxT is all back together. This is the body that came with the car. Just like the truck, it was barely run. I don't think it even ever flipped over. Nice vintage scheme on it. It was just a little dusty, so that cleaned up really well. And here we have the finished product. It turned out so well. It looks like it was just built from the box. I mean, really, there are so little minor defects with it. You get your 2 battery scratches from having a sub-C pack in it. But again, no servo holes. The chassis got just good shine, just good reflection of that carbon plate. Everything else, like I said, with the simple green cleaning, you get such a good shine on all the plastic bits. The tires also cleaned with simple green. They end up getting a little oxidation on them over time, but that cleans all up. Come around the back side here. Just perfect. The gear cover there was real clear. That polished up nice. The tires, I mean, look at that. This truck has been run a little bit and they look like that. This side, the nubs are rounded off just a little bit, but overall, very displayable. Turned out so well. Have the shock tower that we replaced. That's been swapped out. The 5-link mount, they had the broken tab on the top. That's been swapped out. What else? The rear body mount. Nice new body mount, no holes drilled in it. Total package just turned out awesome. I'll give you a shot of the bottom here. That's got its little scratches on it. But overall, clean, all the screws, clean, good all the way up front. It's a 95% car. I mean, bottom of the chassis is the hardest part about it, but overall, real clean build. Thanks for coming along. Stay tuned for the next video. Thanks to all the new subscribers and all the support for the channel. Really appreciate it.